Hello everyone. I'm Alberto from the Wolf Shelter, and welcome to this conversation in search of the greatest understanding possible about the reality of the world. Canine. To do this, we're going to make use of areas of information and sources, such as history, biology, ethology, neuroscience, and epigenetics, among others, to try to understand how our dogs' brains work, the states they produce, and their behaviors. This way, we'll have a better chance of having impact on both their well-being and our relationship with them. But in order to have a conversation where we can maximize learning together and explore new ideas and concepts, we need, at the very least, two things. One is a common language, and two is a framework or context of reference, where we can use that language without feeling like we're constantly being misunderstood or judged. A reference context where polarization, tribalization, many times, the fanaticism of our own opinions can never limit our curiosity. And to start building that framework or context of reference on our part, we offer you two premises that are both basic yet very important. The first is that we assume and understand that everyone participating in this conversation has something in common, and that is the passion for the world. Canine. So, any comment or opinion generated from it is welcome and has a place here. The second is important for us to understand that at no point are we here to try to indoctrinate, dogmatize, or impose a belief system on how you should live your life with your dogs. There isn't just one truth that we're here to reveal. In fact, we have many more questions than answers, and the answers we do have are based on the information and studies that exist. These days, our mission is simple: to share our knowledge, so that together we can try to reduce and put an end to the mistreatment, sacrifice, and abandonment of animals that happens in the society we live in today. At the Wolf Sanctuary, as an animal protection association and as a canine education and rehabilitation center, we work with an average of 250 to 300 dogs each year. That puts us in a position of both privilege. Privilege is the opportunity to make our lives a study of canines. We see responsibility as the duty to reveal the reality of the canine world, regardless of our feelings. Simply, it's about resisting the brain's urge to wander, regardless of how we feel about that reality. In other words, it's about trying to fight against the brain's tendency to go where it wants instead of where it can, into the whole set of information and knowledge that we've gained through experience and study, to the ability to turn them into the necessary tools and techniques to implement them. It's what we call the BASE method. Let's start talking about something that, at first glance, might not seem like the most important thing, but something that is common to both humans and dogs, and something without which, surely, the human-canine bond that we long to decipher wouldn't exist. We're talking about emotions and feelings. What are emotions? The word emotion comes from the Latin emotio, which means impulse or movement toward action. An emotion is simply a chemical reaction in our brain that drives us and moves us to act with the sole purpose of ensuring our survival. In other words, emotions are a defense system of our body that are designed to last for a short period of time, enough to get our body moving and trigger a response proportional to the stimulus that generates them. So, what are feelings? When the emotions generated in the limbic system reach the part of the brain associated with reasoning and logic and are identified, what we know as feelings arise. Feelings are, in other words, the conscious interpretation and subjective experience we have of our emotions. The ability to correctly and early identify emotions for their later management. This is what the American psychologist Daniel Goleman formulated and popularized in 1995 as emotional intelligence. And how are our emotions and feelings similar to those of our dogs? Dogs, humans, and other mammals share brain structures that generate 7 basic emotions. These trigger approach or avoidance behaviors. We share the same brain structure with other mammals, which allows us to generate 7 basic emotional systems. In order to trigger 2 types of behavior, one of approach and the other of avoidance toward the stimulus that provokes them. We know that animals have the capacity and the levels of consciousness necessary to harbor feelings, although it is impossible to know how and to what extent they experience them. Because we don't share the same language to communicate and due to the differences in size and folds in the cerebral cortex. That's why it's important to try to avoid anthropomorphism. What does it mean to project our logic and thoughts onto them? Only if we can accept that in the animal world there are various ways of having feelings, and that we will probably never fully understand them. From our human perspective, we can enjoy that diversity and thus improve our relationship with other species. In other words, our ability to empathize with animals and nature shouldn't depend on their capacity to feel and experience life in the same way we do. From our human perspective, we can enjoy this diversity and thus improve our relationship with other species. That is to say, our capacity for empathy towards animals and nature should not depend on their ability to feel and experience life in the same way as we do. And what happens when there's an overload of emotional burden? Humans in the 21st century no longer need emotions as a basic defense system for survival. What was originally designed to last just long enough to propel our body into action today resides in our prefrontal lobes indefinitely, permeating all our thoughts and opinions. In short, our emotions soak, saturate, and sometimes contaminate both our ideas and our perception of the world around us. Today, it resides in our prefrontal lobes indefinitely, permeating all our thoughts and opinions. In short, our emotions permeate, soak, and sometimes contaminate both our ideas and our perception of the world around us. People who have an emotional overload show greater difficulties when it comes to accessing new information, since the filters and barriers of emotions hinder learning. In other words, an overload of emotional burden makes our brain unwilling to learn, but rather to confirm what it already knows. We're not suggesting that emotions and feelings aren't important. Of course they are. But to explore new ideas and broaden our perspective, we invite you to set aside your experiences for the moment. Knowledge, emotions, and feelings that come with them so that we can have a conversation that allows us to grow and understand the reality of the human-canine bond. One of the key areas, and one of the first, where we try to help everyone who comes to the Lobos shelter. When it comes to conducting dog education and rehabilitation sessions, it's about developing the ability to distinguish between what is an objective fact and what is the subjective narrative that goes along with it. We can all understand that both emotions and feelings are part of the emotional pillar, or the subjective narrative that our concept is built upon. What is a dog?
Look. My life. Buddy. Right now. I mean, ever since I got a dog. It's my life. They are my life. All 3 of them. For us, the dog is part of our family. Well. Growling. Wow.
I would say it's a pet. It's very friendly with humans, but it's really a pet.
I tend not to humanize them, no matter how well I talk to them or how well, but I tend to.
But it's equally important not to lose sight of the objective and historical fact. What is a dog? A dog is basically an animal that we have designed and genetically modified over the last 15 to 30,000 years. And it comes from either the gray wolf or an animal that belongs to a previous pre-evolutionary stage. And neither of these 2 facts is really irrelevant to the conversation. What's relevant and important is to understand that that wild animal had a very specific purpose in life. During those 15 to 30,000 years of evolution of the dog, human beings at a time in their history have not been sedentary as they are today. They have needed and used these animals to accompany them in work tasks. And I fully understand the sensitivity we have as a society regarding certain types of terminology, such as work terminology when referring to dogs. But let's continue along the line we were on, and for anyone who might feel offended by the term work, we can easily replace it perfectly with the purpose in life. The purpose in life of a wild animal is basically to survive as long as possible and to spread as many genes as possible during their life cycle. And once this species no longer responds to the wildlife it once belonged to, we have replaced that purpose in life with doing work for humans. What results is that in the last 50 to 60 years, we have created another unnatural path from the first one, and we are bringing animals into our homes. And people understand that a dog we bring home is a companion animal, when historically and objectively, they are not. What it turns out to be is that over the last 50 to 60 years, we have again created another unnatural channel from the first one, and we are taking the animals home. And people understand that a dog we bring home is a companion animal, when, historically and objectively, they are not. A dog is a working animal that you have to turn into a companion animal. Their job is to understand that their new purpose in life is to be your companion animal. But that's not something all dogs come pre-programmed with by default. And people often ask me, so I can't have a German Shepherd if it's not going to do protection work. I can't have a Husky. If it's not going to pull a sled, I can't have a Border Collie. If it's not going to herd. And the answer is, of course you can have them. The dog's main role is to connect with humans. Humans and wolves initially hunted together, requiring advanced communication. The dog's first job or purpose in life is to connect with humans energetically. Classical ethology suggests that one of the first joint actions we took with those wolves was hunting, but it really feels a bit distant when you understand that the communication, language, and understanding required for that is at a pretty advanced level. Imagine for a moment that we are a tribe of hunter-gatherers 15,000 years ago, and suddenly we come across one or two, a pack of wolves, probably young ones, as they approach humans for the first time. We start spending time together, and we realize that they're not actually attacking us and that we don't feel threatened by their presence. Years ago, and suddenly we come across one or two, a pack of wolves, probably young ones, as they approach humans for the first time. To humans for the first time, and we start spending time together, and we realize that they're not actually attacking us and that we don't feel threatened by their presence. But, of course, 15,000 years ago, there were no cell phones. Now imagine that during the time we've been living alongside those wolves, part of our tribe, that has been on a month-long expedition trying to find food, comes back. How do those wolves know if the people or the rest of the folks coming back are part of our tribe and bringing food for everyone? Or if they represent a threat or danger to us? Are they part of our tribe and bringing food for everyone? Or do they represent a threat or danger to us? And the only explanation is that those animals had an extreme sensitivity to our own sensitivity. So, if we were in a state of panic or fear, those animals would respond by mimicking that state. And if we are in a state of calm, understanding that those people were coming back with food for us, that those wolves also had the ability to mimic, and that they remained in a state of calm. And as a second visual exercise, imagine, for example, people who have suffered from PTSD or post-traumatic stress disorder. How we use therapy or assistance dogs. A therapy or assistance dog is basically a dog that has the ability to identify and recognize a change in state. Many times, even before the person realizes it themselves. And because they have the ability to generate and maintain their own state of calm. Once the handler has physical contact with them, the dog can transmit that state of calm to the person. And with these two examples, we clearly see how the most important thing in the human-canine relationship is the energetic connection. Of course, what energy or frequency of vibration is, how it's produced, and what different types of energetic states or neurological states there are. It's something we'll see later. And once we start to have common definitions and terminology, like what are emotions, what are feelings, and what is a dog, it would be a good idea to create a canine dictionary that would help us shape the language we're going to use from now on. Every time we talk about dogs, so that everyone can have access to it whenever they need it.
One of the main problems we see at the shelter when people come to the rehabilitation sessions is that they aren't clear on what a dog's purpose in life is, and they don't know how to give it to them.
And that is completely true, because when the dog isn't fulfilling its primary purpose in life, which is to be energetically connected with a human, that's when problems start to arise, because they begin to execute the genetic load we've imprinted on them. In other words, the German Shepherd, if it's not connected, starts to protect. And the Border Collie, when it's not connected, starts chasing bikes, skateboards, cars, and so on.
And what's the risk that all this entails? It's that the experience of having a dog can turn into a nightmare.
My name is E01. The dog's name is Yura, and she is currently 3, almost 4 years old. We have problems when it comes to taking her out for walks, especially with other dogs. She gets really crazy, and with people too, with people. She's really distrustful of people she doesn't know. We are in our garden where around my partner and I and a friend bathing. We were just about to leave, and my cousin's wife came in. They released the dogs shortly after entering. They stayed outside, and of course, then she saw the bitch, and the first one she caught. Well, she hooked her. She shook her for 5 seconds, and just enough to screw up her spinal cord, and we ran up to Pamplona. And nothing. At the vet, she was in really bad shape. They took x-rays to see if she could hold on, and it was a tough night.
When Euro arrives at the shelter, beyond the severity of the consequences of the accident that happened and the outcome of her behavior, our work is the same as what we do with all the dogs at the shelter. What we do is an assessment based on 2 very simple metrics to understand the condition or the point where the dog is at. And we threw it a little, and we threw it over there to the part that leads to me. The first is what ability the dog has to identify or recognize the state that we are inducing in the shelter. And the second metric is just as simple, which is basically what ability the dog has to maintain the state that we have previously induced in them. And the result of combining those 2 metrics is basically the brain's neuroplasticity that the dog has at this moment. In other words, what ability does she have to keep learning and to improve both in her states and in her behaviors? Subscribe. Are you okay? Before we can understand this rehabilitation session, we need to know it's about energetic pressure explained as radio frequencies. Imagine the ideal canine frequency is 89.1 FM. Living with 50 dogs daily, we've recognized and decoded that frequency, and we live there with the shelter dogs. Imagine the ideal dog frequency is 89.1 FM. Living with 50 dogs daily, we are tuned into that frequency. Visitors and dogs often tune to 90 FM, 115, or AM. Some come from TV or phones. We have recognized and decoded that frequency, and we already live there, both us, the people who work, and the shelter dogs. And what often happens is that the dogs and the people who come to see us are sometimes tuned into 90 FM, other times they're at 115, some folks are even on AM. And then there are others who don't even know what radio is and come straight from watching TV or scrolling on their phones.
Well, your job is to have the most balanced dog possible. Why? Because even if a dog comes to you like that, to handle it in the best way possible. But where does the work begin? Here.
And part of what we do is reduce the gap between where the dogs and their handlers are and where they really should be for their lives to be much better than they currently are. And to tell both the dog and the human what that frequency consists of, how to find it, and give them the experience of having lived it. We focus on showing you the possibilities of your dogs, of having lived it. We focus on showing you the possibilities of your dogs. We create an ideal context, or as close to ideal as possible, and we really see what abilities your dog has to navigate in it. Perfect. Thank you very much. Feel it again. And most of the time, it turns out to be surprising for people who never imagined how their dog could behave the way they do with us. Well, look. No. And in our concept of dog education, it's essential to know how to navigate the loss and grieving process of the animals we consider family. Because if everything goes as it naturally should, we all will have to say goodbye to our dogs, who are members of our family.
How was it coming to the shelter and reaching out to me?
Well, when I contacted you, it was mostly, I said I would like to help. It was like I needed to. I want to help other dogs. I want to. And at the same time, I want to help myself. So I said, well, I thought about you all. And I sent you an email. I came with the intention of doing a lot of things. You were asking me, and what do you think you can help us with? And I was telling you, well, whatever it takes, right? Well, to clean kennels, to take care of the dogs, whatever it is. And that was the idea. And the idea changed a lot. Because in the end, I took the volunteering, me, to see how I was going to feel, if I was going to want to have a dog again, or if I wouldn't want to have one again. I didn't even know your age. I was going to feel if I was going to want to have a dog again, or if I wouldn't want to have one again.
I didn't even know your age, or what your face looked like, or what your voice sounded like. Nothing. I knew you were a nurse, and that you were going to get to know the shelter.
Then I'm already C. Well, you gave me your phone number. And there, I explained a bit more. Really, my reason for coming here was, well, to overcome, or try to overcome the fear of having a dog again. The night we arrived, you were there. Surrounded by dogs, and we were going down a slope that's over there. And you said to me, well, tell me. And then Adri, well, started crying nonstop. And this dog came, Bjork, and she stuck to me. She clung to me really tight. Really tight, really tight. She clung to my chest really tight. Alberto told me this is not a coincidence. I remember a phrase that Alberto told me. You said, this is not a coincidence, that this dog has stuck to you. You told me, you said, this is not a coincidence, that this dog is stuck to you. They say, BIOR is a therapy dog. Cool, that already made me feel better then. Our dog, he had a congenital disease that we were unaware of, a kidney disease, and he died. There was a big pause in my life. My life just stopped. My life was already kind of on hold, and the one thing that kept it moving was my dog. My life was already kind of on hold. And the one that kept it moving, that was my dog. Yeah, well, it was really quick. It was unexpected. And we put her to sleep on December 23rd. Right. And as a result of that, I was, let's say, very sick. 4, 7 months, 6 months. I've always wanted to ask you all, when we left, what conversation did you all have that night about us? Because you all told us, tomorrow we have a session. Do you want to come see it? You were invited. Because we let you go. I mean, I let you go therein. It was like a bomb, you know. A personal sensitivity. Very powerful, you know. Without knowing you at all, I told you, Bear, like, wow.
It was what we talked about, that it was going to be great for you, spending a few days here at the shelter. And it might be good for you to be present in a rehabilitation session where we're not talking with you. We're talking to another person, and you're just listening. And you can channel everything that we transmit.
Yeah, I mean, I remember the first session I saw with Alberto when he started talking. It was like I felt super connected to what he was saying. When Alberto first started explaining how a dog's brain works, the states it has, I found a lot of similarities with the brain of a dog, the states it has. I found a lot of similarities with the depressive disorder, which is what I have. I mean, at that point it was like, in fact, I was looking at Javi and it was like, you know, wow, you know, wow.
When he told me that he had talked with Mark coming to the shelter, it really worried me because, of course, I had been there for 6 months, protecting, establishing all the possible experiences that Adri had to go through to leave, recovering little by little. And it seemed like after what had happened with me, and the whole 6-month process of major depression I had, it seemed like major depression I had. It seemed like that excitement for future things had disappeared. She was talking about herself saying, I'm never going to be able to have a dog again. What was maybe missing was a healing process. To close, Adri is a person with a level of energy, like you said, with the bubble, yeah. Her job, it requires a very high level of activity. She works in a children's operating room where kids come in for surgery, and being a nurse and having to be in an operating room where she's playing all day trying to save kids, sometimes it goes well, sometimes it goes wrong, so that required a really high level of concentration. But then, of course, the level of stress. It's brutal. I would come home from work, maybe after having worked on a transplant. 14 hours. I would get home and then I would go work out. I would go for a run. I decided to volunteer for COVID and, in some circumstances, very complicated. Going to a place where they didn't have the necessary equipment, with inadequate training, trying to save people who weren't even their family. But to give it your all to try to save people who arrived there sick and could die on the same day. And after being in COVID for 2 months straight, well, one of the things that happens when you live, one of these circumstances is that you decide to do everything you've ever wanted in your life, everything you've ever wanted. I'm not going to hold back on anything after having lived through circumstances like these. And we decided to take on a burden, a greyhound that we adopted, and that led us to live 2 years of our lives. could have been the two best designs of our lives. Definitely. That terror, it provided me with calm in our home. Calm. And that calm, it provided her, especially Adri. Adri was coming back from something, from anywhere she worked, coming home, and it was the dog who provided her with this. So, of course, when what provides you with that disappears, well, your world comes crashing down. And Adri, and I think that in the most complex life circumstances, more complex, there's a super deep depression. And we had to, well, we had lived through a pandemic 2 years earlier. We lived our own pandemic, our own virus, and the only ones who could get through it were us.
When you spent 2 days here at the refuge, you decide to scatter your dog's ashes here. Yeah. You had them with you. You had never seen them or picked them up.
Ew.
And you decided to scatter them here at the refuge. Why?
Well, the first thing, when I wrote to you, it was the first time I was able to ask Javi where Miga's ashes were. I had not been able to. 7, 8 months. I couldn't bring myself to ask that question. At first, I wanted them to be here because I thought this place was special. But when I was already here, I said, there's no better place for her. I was able to thank her in a much healthier way and to get rid of a lot of healthy and take a lot from me. Guilt. Gain a lot of acceptance. I remember a phrase from Alberto that he told me, that I couldn't do anything to save her. And it was something that has tormented me a whole lot, always. And, I mean, she had the best life possible. The time she spent with you. And this is where it ends, you know. It's how it is. And getting rid of all that emotional baggage I had, you know. It was like a huge release. It helped me a lot to heal a wound that I had very, very open. And I've also experienced that. When you all have experienced losses here at the refuge, the duel is part of life, and it will pass because, unfortunately, dogs live shorter lives than we do, and you have to let them go. Live shorter lives than we do, and you have to let them go. When it's their time, and focus on them. Not in when, nor in why, but in how I am going to continue. Moving forward, you know. I said goodbye to my dog with 2 people I had just met who were you, and I felt completely wrapped up and supported. Without. No. Today is nice.
It may not seem important, but loss is something we all face throughout our lives. We are all going to lose a loved one in one way or another. And for those of us who have chosen a lifestyle of being animal companions, we are doubly exposed to that loss simply because our life cycle far exceeds, unfortunately, that of our dogs.
there are two important things to understand on a neurological level. The first is that professionals in neuroscience and psychology today understand the grieving process as a motivational state or a state of anticipation, and also how our brain understands and defines our emotional or affective relationships, both with humans and with animals, and sometimes even with things. There is a lot of scientific literature and recent research that indicates, through brain imaging, that the activity, blood flow, in areas of the brain related to 1. Physical pain, which means it's not crazy to say that it hurts when you've experienced a loss because the area of the brain associated with physical pain is very active. Also, the nucleus accumbens, which is basically the brain's reward system, is also highly active. The excess activity in the nucleus accumbens basically means an excess of dopamine, and dopamine isn't just something related to our well-being or happiness. Dopamine is really about putting us in a state of motivation and anticipation for something we unconsciously desire. This is true in addiction. It's true when we're hungry and want to eat. It's true when we're thirsty and want to drink. And it's also true when we want to reproduce. In English, it's called center of mass forward, which is basically the center of gravity tilted forward. This is a state where both your body and mind want to resolve something that they really don't have access to resolve. And it turns out that in the inferior parietal lobe of our brains, a map is created that triangulates across 3 dimensions to determine and define all our emotional relationships. That map is built on 3 different dimensions, one of space, another of time, and another of emotional closeness. And all 3 of those dimensions are related to proximity. The dimension of space has to do with where the loved one is physically located. In other words, they are close to me, they are far from me, they are very far from me. The dimension of time has to do with how long it would take us to reach that loved one if we wanted to see them. That is to say, you're a quarter of an hour away, you're 2 hours away, or you're 4 days away. And the dimension of emotional closeness is determined by the number of memories we have with the loved one. In other words, the more experiences and memories we have established with the loved one, the greater emotional closeness we will have. And what happens when we experience a loss and find ourselves in the grieving process is that both the dimensions of space and time become disconnected from the emotional dimension, which is the only one that really remains. In our brain, being the prediction machine that it is, no longer has references to find that person or that animal or that loved one in the dimensions of space and time that it was used to doing. If you have the ability to know where you are in the grieving process, then we will have many more opportunities to optimize, navigate, and even speed up the process. Person or that animal or that loved one in the dimensions of space and time in which he was accustomed to doing so. If you have the ability to know where you are in the grieving process, then we'll have many more opportunities to optimize, navigate, and even speed up the process. What does that mean? That we can reach the ability to do what time naturally does, which is to create another point of reference of space and create another point of reference in time that is much closer to us. What does this translate to in practical tools? So, trying to reconfigure that map to understand how we feel about that loved one we've lost in the present. What?
We go.
Let's go.
Come on.
I don't think this is about dogs.
No, it goes much deeper than that.
This is a bit about life, about how we are in our lives. That is to say, how our life is affecting us in our relationships, in our relationship with work, in our relationship with our family, and affecting us in our relationships, in our relationship with work, in our relationship with our family. And it can really help you understand, really, can help you understand your personal needs beyond just dogs. I mean, it goes way beyond. It's not just about dogs and people, but it's about people and dogs.
I think it's A. It's hard to explain, but I think it's A. It's a place that, the way Alberto and Mar works is, especially that it helps to heal. And it helps to heal. a lot of things, a lot of wounds that many people have. That don't know how to heal. That seeks healing outside, seeks healing outside. And in the end, it's something very simple, something that when you're in a really complicated situation, it's not, but it is. To be at peace with yourself. Where are you, Augusto? Where are you happy? What frequency do you want to be on?
The next chapter is crucial in this dog training series. It covers energies, vibration frequencies, and calm states for dogs and humans.
It's crucial as we'll discuss energy and vibrations, explore calm state effects on dogs and humans, and examine the bond. We are going to talk in detail about what we mean by a calm state, what it consists of, and what things can happen when both a dog and a human are in a calm state. And we're also going to talk about what the bond between humans and dogs really means.